Ian Khama has been president of Botswana for less than a year, appointed by Parliament on the 1st of April 2008. He inherited a lot of problems. Economic growth, long based on Botswana's diamond mines, was slipping. The previous year's harvest had been hit by drought. The country was still reeling from the impact of HIV/AIDS, a quarter of the adult population infected. And the crisis in neighboring Zimbabwe was going from bad to worse. But Ian Khama also had a lot of advantages, besides his name and his inheritance as paramount chief of the Bamangwatu, the largest ethnic group in Botswana. After 10 years as vice president, he knew the ropes of government, and Botswana was rated as among the top 10% of states worldwide in terms of stability. But becoming president wasn't always Ian Khama's destiny.
By nature, maybe the reason why little is known about me is because I prefer to maintain a low profile. You may be aware that before I entered politics, I was in the military, and it had not actually been my intention to make politics a career. My predecessor asked me if I would come in as his vice president then to come into politics. It set all sorts of alarm bells ringing in my head as to whether this is really what I should do. But based on the reasons he gave me, I decided to take the plunge, and here I am.
12 days into his presidency, Ian Khama attended an emergency regional summit on the crisis in Zimbabwe. Mugabe's government had lost the elections. His supporters had unleashed a campaign of intimidation against supporters of the opposition movement for democratic change. Of all Zimbabwe's neighbors, Botswana took the boldest step against Mugabe.
Well, we withdrew our recognition of him as the president and all his political appointees. That's why I stayed away from the SADC summit last year, because I said if he was going to be there, I couldn't sit at the same table, because he had betrayed what he had stood for during the days when he was involved in the liberation struggle. We have always understood that the role and the responsibility of a government is to run the affairs of the country in the best interests of its citizens. And that's it. And it's not about the leader or the leadership. So self-interest is what has also brought about the collapse in that country.
The region's solution in the end was the formation of a government of national unity between Mugabe's ZANU-PF party and the opposition movement for democratic change. Botswana once again recognized Robert Mugabe as president, but Khama is no fan of the recent power-sharing deals in Zimbabwe and Kenya.
Even what happened in Kenya, although the circumstances were different, but it is not the way to go, definitely not. What we should be concentrating on is how to put our house in order in running credible elections and not coming up with power-sharing agreements, because it will be a trend which will be taken up by others.
When Khama arrived at the signing ceremony for the power-sharing deal in Zimbabwe, he was cheered by opposition members. But the opposition at home are less enthusiastic. Some accuse him of being an autocrat. Botswana's leading English-language newspaper said recently that new security powers threaten to make the country a police state.
I will not apologize for giving the perception that I'm autocratic. If something needs to be done, I want to get it done, and it should be done yesterday. And if that is my style, but at the end of the day, it delivers to the citizens and delivers to their expectations, then I believe I have accomplished my mission.
How would you describe your leadership style?
I like to be very hands-on in the way I run the government. I make sure that I'm kept informed of everything that's going on. I ensure that if things are not going right, that there's follow-up. I give deadlines by which I expect things to be done. And I'm not tolerant of poor performance. And I have introduced that in the government, that people should know that when you're in government, we are not above the citizens that we serve. We are there to provide a public service.
On a continent where alliances are often more important than hard work in government, Khama has not been afraid to fire incompetent ministers. He regularly travels around the country holding public meetings to hear problems firsthand, dragging his ministers along to account to the citizens. Many who attend these meetings admire him simply because he's the first president's son and the legacy of his father is still influential.
Your father, Sir Seretse Khama, is revered not only here in Botswana, but all over Africa. He's seen as the father of this nation. He helped liberate Botswana and bring independence to this country. How has his great legacy influenced you?
Indeed. In fact, I think back on several occasions to what he said to me. He actually wanted me to go into politics. And I never gave him an answer, yes or no, because at that time, as I said, I wasn't that interested. And even today and in the past, in the recent past, if there's ever an issue that I'm not too sure which direction I should take, and having consulted other people, it's still not clear, then I would say to myself, well, what would my father have done in my position? And in most cases, I then am able to arrive at an answer. And I say, yes, in fact, I think that's what he would have preferred. And I say, well, I'll go with that. So yes, he has had a lot of influence. And indeed, my mother as well, because she was also a very strong personality and very much interested in the welfare of the people of this country.
But Khama is facing problems his father never had to deal with. The task of diversifying Botswana's economy during a global financial crisis and keeping Botswana's famous record of economic growth intact. He says he's expecting a huge deficit, but his government will continue spending on development.
Over the years, because of the way we have managed our resources, we have built up quite significant foreign exchange reserves. So we're going to rely on those to borrow the shortfall that we would have. And it's going to be a big shortfall, quite a big deficit we're going to have this coming financial year, which starts on the 1st of April. But our credit ratings and are good, and our credit worthiness is good, which will then allow us to borrow. And only really dip into our reserves if there would ever come a time that we were not able to borrow. And that's the way we've decided to go.